Okay, so welcome to our 10th and final video of the accounting process, which should cover chapters 1 through 3 for the first test. And in this final video, I want to talk a little bit about, how changes in balance sheet 1, beginning balance sheet and ending balance sheet, how we can, what brings about these changes, and what brings about changes in shareholders' equity from period 1 to period 2. Okay, and so how we can interpret this data. Here you have all the data from the previous example we had. So you can see balance sheet changes are driven by simple changes within each balance sheet, and then there's also an outside component which affects the balance sheet changes. It affects specifically the shareholders' equity portion, right? It's net income, right? Net income has nothing to do with, well, it has something to do with the top data here, but it comes from the income statement, and we roll it into retained earnings, which subsequently is part of the entire balance sheet, right? Also, we have common stock, so if you issue new shares, that comes from outside shareholders and it goes directly into the common stock, and it also affects cash. And dividends is another entry that affects your balance sheet and your changes in balance sheet. So this is a lot of data here, so let's just use a more simplified tab here. I've created this tab here with data that I made up. It's simplified. So here we have balance sheet at period 1, time 1. That's beginning balance sheet. This is ending balance sheet, and we see the changes from period 1 to period 2 within each account. I simplified it. I just have one account for asset and one for accounts payable, but it's for liabilities, which I use accounts payable, but it works just the same. And we have common shareholders equity, which I divide into common stock and retained earnings, and we have the different type of items that affect it, which is new issues, new shares issued. That's 50,000. That'll bring 50,000 of common stock in, and of course you're going to bring cash in. Dividends here is 30,000. Don't know why I have it highlighted. And dividends over here will decrease retained earnings, even though I have it as a plus here. Over here in this formula I subtracted, and net income rolls over and increases retained earnings, which increases shareholders equity overall, right? And if it's a net loss, then it'll decrease retained earnings overall. So as you can see here, this balance sheet at period 1 satisfies the accounting equation, which states that assets equals liabilities plus stockholders equity. We have 225 here and 225. And ending period balance sheet also satisfies the equation. Assets equals liabilities plus stockholders equity, 290 and 290. Let's look across. Let's see if ending shareholders equity satisfies this top equation, which says ending shareholder equity equals beginning shareholders equity, which is 150, plus new sales of shares 50, minus dividends 30, plus or minus net income or net loss. It's a plus if it's net income, and it's a minus if it's a net loss. And we go from 150 to 195. So let's see if that works. If I take 150 and let's say 150, and I added 50,000, which was related to new shares sold. I subtracted 30,000 related to dividends given, and I added 25,000 related to net income, and there you have it, 195. So it does satisfy that formula as well. So we're going to use these two formulas to solve certain problems. And let me just give you a sample of a problem. I'm going to white this out, so that I usually white it out beforehand. I forgot. So that we could focus one by one on how we solve this problem. Okay. So let's say I have a problem that says something like this. At the end of its accounting period, in year 1, company XYZ has assets of 940. So assets is 940 for this company at the end of year 1. And it says, and liabilities of $300,000. That's the information that they give me. And it says, during year 2, stockholders invested an additional $73,000. So they invested an additional $73,000 and received $33,000 in dividends from the business. So that's common shares that they issued and received $73,000 in funding, and they gave $33,000 out in dividends. What is the amount of net income? So they're asking us to find out net income if, as of the end of year 2, assets were $995 and liabilities were $270, right? So at the end of year 2 is asset $995 and liabilities is $270. So the question is, what's net income? So we look at these formulas and let's start trying to solve the puzzle. Let's find out what equity is here. We see that net income is here in this formula and that it somehow involves equity, right? So if we could somehow figure out what ending equity was and what beginning equity was, we could figure it out through algebra, because we know that new sales of shares was 73, right? And we know that dividends were 33. So how can we find out ending shares and beginning equity, shareholders' equity? Well, we go up here and we see this formula, asset equals liability plus stockholders' equity. So beginning shareholders' equity is going to be beginning asset minus beginning liability, right? And so if we do that, we subtract 300 from 940, we know that beginning shareholders' equity is 640. And we could do the same thing here to calculate ending shareholders' equity. And 995 minus 270 is 725, okay? So now we have all the information we need to satisfy this formula, and the only information we won't know is net income, but through algebra we could figure it out, right? So let's plug these numbers in. This is beginning shareholders' equity, this is ending shareholders' equity, this is common stock, and this is the dividends, right? And somehow, if I plug it in here, in this formula, we have ending shareholders' equity is 725, right? And then beginning shareholders' equity is 640. Common shares sold is 73, minus the 33 in dividends plus net income. So that's the formula that I just matched up from here, from this formula. Now if we use algebra, by shifting all this over here to this side and isolating net income, we could find out what net income is, right? So when we shift these numbers over here, as you know, you should know algebra by now, all you do is change their signs, and you should have something like this, right? You should have 725, the 640 goes to this other side negative, the 73 positive goes here negative, and the 33 negative goes here positive, equals net income, right? And just to make it easier to see, let's just put the net income on this side and that on this side without changing signs, because I'm just rewriting it differently, right? So net income equals 725 minus 640 minus 73 plus 33. And so what is net income? If we do that here, we will get the answer, which is 45,000. So that's your answer. So this is an example of the type of questions that might come up in the test. You need to know how to apply given certain information, how to deduct other information that's not given by applying these two formulas. Now some of it could be very simple. I could ask a question like, I could give you the assets and liabilities of a year and ask you what the shareholders' equity is. Of course, that's very simple, because all you have to do is apply this formula. In this case, I gave you all the information except this one, right? I could choose to give you net income and not give you dividends. So I could exclude that one. But overall, you're going to go ahead and solve it all the same way. You're going to have to use this sort of logic. And so these type of tests are questions are going to be on the test. And so you would have to go ahead and learn how to analyze your beginning balance sheet, ending balance sheet, and net income in light of that information, and just give me the answer of whatever I'm asking for that's missing. Okay, so that's it. Through the first 10 videos, you have pretty much everything that's going to be on the first test. I'm not going to say everything. Let's just say 75%, because you should still read from the book and study the exercises. Okay, so good luck, and well, I'll be posting other videos for the next test as well. Thanks.